Welcome to another edition of the EmpowerLA podcast, the podcast where we discuss all things neighborhood councils with the people who live, work, and play in the city of LA. This is your host, Brett Shears from the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. I'm very excited for our guest today, Scott Epstein, Chair of the Mid-City West Community Council. Scott is a leader in the neighborhood council system with a passion for transportation and housing policy. In our conversation, Scott talks about the importance of these issues.
The way we build our cities is an expression of our values.
And how you can use the neighborhood councils to tackle them.
You can go to from 0 to 100 really quickly, and that's kind of exciting.
And maybe even get a couple of $1 million for your community in the process.
We won the grant.
And how much was that grant for?
It's $2.3 million,
wow,
including the city match.
Wow. Welcome to the EmpowerLA podcast, Scott. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Good. So, it's really great that you made the time to do this. I think you're an important person in the neighborhood council system. We see you all over the place. You're also part of a really huge neighborhood council, which I think is kind of a novelty. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But before we get into everything, I just want to know a little bit about you, a little bit about your background, who you are, how you got to this place. So let her rip.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. This is a pleasure. And I'm so glad you started this podcast. So I grew up in a town on Long Island, just outside New York City, called Great Neck. And then my bachelor's degree is from Duke University, where I was a drama major, but also studied a bunch of public policy. And then I actually was a professional actor for a few years and decided that wasn't what I wanted to do for my whole life. I went back to policy school at Georgetown in Washington, D.C., and then moved here to Los Angeles about 10 years ago with my girlfriend at the time, wife now, who wanted to be a Trojan and study film at USC.
And you're a father now, I know that.
I am, yes. We have a 3-month-old daughter, Rose.
Congratulations.
Thank you so
awesome.
much.
The whole neighborhood council system rejoiced. So you're here, you're active in the neighborhood council system. How did you get involved? What's your background that led you there?
Sure. So when I moved to LA, at first I sort of had trouble sort of wrapping my arms around the city. It was sort of a different place than I'd lived before. But as I began exploring LA, I really sort of fell in love with it. And I also became really interested in the ways in which LA was evolving. I think we're at a time when LA is sort of embracing public life in a way that it hasn't, sort of in the latter half of the 20th century. And I was excited about the things that were really, the ambitious things happening in LA, from the largest increase in transit in the country to embracing bicycling and public spaces and new parks. And I sort of wanted to be a part of that movement. And so the neighborhood council system seemed like a way of getting involved. I attended one meeting and I said, okay, I think I can do this. And I ran. And I was lucky enough to be elected. And
they didn't appoint you. They didn't appoint you to the board at that very meeting, right there. It's the way I've seen it work many times.
It does happen sometimes that way, but I actually ran.
Well, that's great. Yeah, congratulations on getting that far. You mentioned public life. What are some of the elements of public life to you? How do you define that?
Sure. I mean, I think LA sort of, I think, for a lot of the 20th century was about sort of backyard culture, and, sort of having your car and going to a place for entertainment and coming back and doing a barbecue
right.
and hanging out in your pool. And I think we're sort of changing from a backyard culture to a front stoop culture. Mm-hmm. I think part of that is that we're getting denser, and I think as we're pushed closer together, we need to embrace street life. We need to embrace more public space where we can gather, where we can connect with each other. And I think also LA right now, when you talk about public life, I think is sort of just now embracing the challenge, sort of taking on the serious challenges in our city. Mm-hmm. So you see, the most ambitious plan ever to to combat homelessness. We still have a long way to go on that.
Yeah.
But we're in a better place, I think, than we were 10, 15 years ago. There's a lot of seriousness in terms of a strategic plan, both on the county and the city's radar. So, and how are we going to address creating a transportation system that's more sustainable,
Mm-hmm.
combating climate change? I think all of these things, these public issues are in people's minds, and we're thinking about how to solve them on sort of a local level now.
Yeah. And you are on the Mid-City West Community Council.
Correct.
Right? Okay. So this just happens to be one of the bigger councils. When did you start with them?
So I was first elected about 5 years ago in November of 2012.
Okay. And what was your, first foray into it like? What did you think of it? What was your experience like?
It was, it snowballed for me very quickly.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it and became more and more involved very quickly. When I first joined, I had this interest in transportation policy, and so I went to our executive officers meeting, and where they were assigning people to different committees, and said, I think maybe transportation I would like to be on the transportation committee. And our chair at the time said, oh, you know what? Actually, we need a chair for that committee. Would you like to be chair? And I said, okay. So that was really how it began for me, and figuring out how we could be more proactive on issues around transportation. And so that's how my leadership on the council began. And then I ended up being elected first vice chair, second vice chair, and first vice chair. And then when our chair resigned, chair. So it all sort of happened very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think of that meme that escalated quickly. I mean, that's kind of what happens in the neighborhood council system is like I said, you can get appointed, like the meeting that you go to at some councils.
Yeah.
Maybe it takes another month, just to be a little generous. But then you get appointed to a committee, you get a leadership position, and you see. And I think that's what a lot of people don't really I think they're a little surprised by, maybe taken off guard if they've been involved in the system by it. But a lot of people don't know about those opportunities.
You can go to from 0 to 100 really quickly, and that's kind of exciting.
Yeah,
and it really is a place, I think, where you can be entrepreneurial and really create, sort of dive into what you're passionate about.
Absolutely. So you've been involved in the council for, almost 6 years now, going back to 2012, like you said. What is one of the more memorable successes you've had while on the council? Sure.
So one of the things that I'm most proud of is a project that I started when I was Transportation Committee Chair, and we're still working on. So we actually put together a plan for two what are called bicycle-friendly streets through our community.
Right.
So this is the idea that we can use these residential lower traffic streets, do traffic calming, and they can become really great places for biking and walking. When I became Transportation Committee Chair, I noticed, that in the whole sort of Midtown, Wilshire Corridor area, there was very little bicycle infrastructure. So I was trying to figure out how we could change that. And this was actually a part of the bike plan as I was studying that really wasn't implemented at all citywide. Right. So there seemed to be an opportunity. So we actually created a proactive vision, a conceptual plan, which ended up passing our board unanimously. And we kept on going at it. We had a meeting downtown. We did a bicycle ride with city staff members. We did community engagement events around it. We did something called the Friendly Ride, where we showed people in the community. We had 45 people riding their bikes around the community, and we showed people what does this intersection look like now? What could it look like in the future? And through all of that engagement and advocacy, we developed relationships with city staff members. And when the Metro 2015 call for projects came up, David Summers, who was the head bike planner at City Planning at the time, and now is at LADOT, said, "Oh wait, this might be a really good fit for this grant call." And so we pursued it, and Council Member Paul Koretz came on board in terms of nominating the project for the city council to apply for the Metro funds, and we won the grant.
And how much was that grant for?
It's $2.3 million,
Wow.
including the city match.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and the money is just we've made some small improvements in the last year, but the money is really going to kick in this year. So we're going to start to see some really exciting stuff.
That's amazing. So you kickstarted this process where you saw this vacuum in this existing plan. You said, there's money on the table. We're going to go after it. And your community, of all communities, got a big chunk of it. So
yeah, I mean, it really, what I found is you create the vision, the resources are out there.
Yes,
so so that's been a lot of my approach on the neighborhood council. I didn't create this plan knowing that this 2015 call would be right, would be happening 2 years later.
Right.
It really just was like, oh, let's create a vision. And it was really me, started with me riding around my neighborhood and, looking at bike design guides online and thinking, what could we do?
Wow.
And then getting the community excited about it too.
And was this a collaboration? Were there multiple board members involved, or were you constantly bringing stuff to the board or committees?
Yeah, it was. So it was something that the board got really excited about, and particularly people on our transportation committee, and something that attracted more people to participate in the council.
Right.
So that's another thing that I found in my experience is you do interesting, good work that attracts more people that are interested in that work, and that's been one of our most effective recruitment tools. Quite frankly, is you create a vision for bicycle infrastructure. People who care about that issue get involved in the council. You opt into the homeless count. People that care about homelessness get involved in the council. So that's been a success for us.
Yeah, that's an amazing success. I think we look to that success we've highlighted before at the department, and it's the kind of thing where other neighborhood councils aspire. They dream of doing amazing things like that. So on the flip side of that, you've been with the council for a good while now and in positions of leadership. Are there any notable setbacks that you've had that, make you really rethink what you either could have done differently, or, some systemic that you wish had been different?
We've had a few setbacks. I mean, change is hard. So most recently, also on the transportation front, we've put a lot of energy over years, actually, with a lot of board members doing a lot of hard work to try to convince the city to make 6th Street in the Miracle Mile safer, which is a street where we've seen 3 people die in the last 5 years, and even more people die in the decade before that. And we put a lot of effort, including hosting a town hall meeting, and we ended up passing a motion recommending a comprehensive redesign of that street, which would add a center turn lane, which is really the key safety enhancement, also bike lanes for much of the stretch. And we were not successful with all that effort in getting Councilmember Rue to approve the plan. So that was a disappointment.
So, you put in the work, the plan exists. Is it the kind of thing where it's shelved and it's not a possibility because something else happened? Or, what happens to the work at that point? Is there a way to repurpose it? Yeah,
I mean, so we created a conversation. So I'm proud of that. We didn't quite get where we wanted to get. We did actually move Councilmember Rue to act on the issue and recognize that it was a serious issue. And so he actually he has a much more modest plan that is moving forward, which actually just implemented recently, to add one left turn pocket at really what is probably the worst intersection of all of them, Hauser, where 2 people have actually died. And so I don't think there's no way that would have happened without our advocacy, quite frankly. So that's been a positive. I do think it's an improvement, but not nearly sufficient to the task of making the streets safe. And so, but there's been this whole public conversation now about it, right? Multiple articles in the media, in the Beverly Press, in the Larchmont Buzz, in Curbed LA. So there's a whole public record of advocacy on the part of the community, and not just Mid-City West. We actually got Park La Brea Residents Association, Larch La Brea Hancock Homeowners Association also to vote unanimously for the plan, which was not adopted. So there's this whole conversation about what to do. So I think if the improvements that are being made do not end all of the carnage on the street, then I think there's another option on the table.
Yeah.
And I'm hopeful that the city will opt into that in the future.
And that work can always be a point of reference to say
exactly
what are some of the alternatives.
Yeah.
So you're clearly very passionate about transportation policy. You talked about the successes, some setbacks, but all the energy ultimately put into it. Why transportation? Why is it so important to you?
I think there's a lot of reasons. So number one, I think it's the way we build our cities is an expression of our values. And I think it's really is a social justice and equity issue. Does somebody who's riding a bike, who's taking transit, who's walking, do they have a safe and enjoyable an experience than if they're in a car? Mm-hmm. A lot of people in this city don't have cars, don't drive. Or, my family, personally, we have one car. And so I rely on those other alternative transportation modes all of the time. And it opens your eyes. If you're used to only driving, it will open your eyes to the conditions out there for people who are not driving. And so I think it's a social equity issue. I think it's also a really important sustainability issue. The largest sector that is in terms of producing greenhouse gases in California, the largest sector is not energy production, it's transportation.
Yeah.
And so if we want to fix that, we have to rebalance our transportation system. I think also in terms of economic security and mobility, it's really important. We often think about social policy, we think about income, how to improve people's income, but there's another side to it. It's what are people spending money on? Mm-hmm. And the lion's share, particularly in places like Los Angeles, is housing and transportation. Yep. If you can give people the opportunity to live a wonderful life in Los Angeles without owning a car or owning one car instead of two cars for a family, that is a huge thing in terms of people being able to build wealth and put money back into the community. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of research that shows in places like Portland that has a 6% mode share for bicycles, a lot of that money is going right back into the community instead of these big car manufacturers. And that helps everyone.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you talk about investment in community and transportation policy is so related. I think me as someone who I'm definitely a public transportation advocate. I'm a car owner. I do not own a car, never owned a car actually. Mm-hmm. And being a Los Angeles native, that's been difficult. It's been a challenge, but I see you're talking about the conditions on the ground. I think that I really wish more people would take that mm-hmm. Do that experiment a little bit more often, because it does open your eyes and you see the benefit to so many people. I don't, you probably know the statistics about the percentage of people who own cars and stuff like that, but I think that alone is going to open more people's eyes to the importance of this issue.
Yeah, I wish I could take the whole city council on a bus ride across town.
They need it.
Go to a bus stop with no shelter in the summer,
baking under a bus sign. That's about it for your pole for your shade. But in regards to transportation more generally, what role do neighborhood councils have in this system or advocacy or diagnosis?
I think they can play a tremendous role. I think other councils are doing so as well. I mean, we're in a time of change in terms of transportation. We can't keep on doing what we've been doing, which is design a system solely around one type of transportation. Mm-hmm. And elected officials can be reticent to make change. They can be conservative because they need to be reelected. And so often what the difference between improving the public realm, improving our transportation system, and not can just be the political will and the public support. So you see Los Feliz Neighborhood Council getting new crosswalks on Hollywood Boulevard in their sort of burgeoning restaurant row there. You see Eagle Rock Neighborhood Council, which was intimately involved with improving Colorado Boulevard. So it's not just a really fast way to get to Pasadena, but a neighborhood street.
Right.
And I think that more and more councils are taking a really active role on this issue in terms of promoting active transportation and transit. And I hope that Mid-City West inspires even more to do that.
Yeah, I think you are. You're definitely leading the way on that. So Mid-City West was actually nominated for a Streetsblog LA award. It's just for people who don't know, Streetsblog LA is a popular blog dedicated to transportation issues. This one's specific to LA. There are ones for other cities. But the award was for Elected Official of the Year, which is unique just in terms of its phrasing, right? We're talking about Mid-City West Community Council as Elected Official of the Year. So that's kind of novel and interesting.
Yeah.
And we should note that another neighborhood council was nominated. It was Mar Vista, I believe, right?
Yep,
so,
that's right.
So there were a couple. You ended up finishing second, though, but it was a solid second. So, it was an online kind of voting total, just so people reference. But that's great. To State Assemblyman Santiago. Right?
Santiago, from the east side,
Yeah.
And Assembly Member Laura Friedman was also nominated. So there were some heavy hitters here.
Yeah. But you did, like I said, solid second place. But what were you actually nominated for?
So it was for the body of our transportation work, but the nomination called out two projects in particular. One was the 6th Street advocacy that I was just discussing with you. The other project is something that our board member, Josh Paget, who's one of our wonderful board members, one of his passion projects, which is Parking Day.
Right.
Which we've been doing, which we did for 4 years in a row.
For people who don't know what happens on a Parking Day.
So Parking Day is an international event which involves urban designers and community members and neighborhood councils creating little pop-up parks in parking spaces for one day.
It's like reclaiming these spaces, kind of.
Yeah, and it's a way of sort of starting a conversation about public space and how we use space and the need for more gathering places. So it started 4 years ago. I guess it was 2014. I think was the first year we did it. When we did one parking spot on La Brea Avenue. In front of Sycamore Kitchen, I believe. The next year, it was 4 different parklets, Melrose, Fairfax, Wilshire Boulevard, La Brea. It was sort of a whole festival. And then this year, we actually did what was probably our biggest event yet. And we created not just a parklet, but actually a pop-up plaza. We worked with the Melrose Business Improvement District to close the end of a street as it meets Melrose, a street called Stanley Avenue, and created a whole little mini park, actually, with benches and a bus selling artisanal products. And so that's been really exciting. And we're hoping, actually, that we can work with the Melrose bid to actually make that a permanent public plaza, perhaps through the city's People Street program.
That's amazing. So all that work together helped, secure this nomination. You all get recognized. How did you actually feel when you heard the news? Were you surprised?
It was thrilling. I was. It was a little surprising. This is, as you say, a little bit unusual for a neighborhood council of 35 members to be nominated for Elected Official of the Year, and it's the first time it's ever happened. So it was really exciting. I think it's really exciting to be recognized, and for really moving the dial on active transportation. We this past year has been kind of a tough year for the Vision Zero and Complete Streets movement in Los Angeles. A lot of some projects were reversed because of public opposition. A lot of things didn't happen because elected officials nixed them. So some of the energy and some of the leadership has come from the neighborhood level. So it's
Right.
nice to see that recognized.
Yeah, and it just shows you that the grassroots is being recognized. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's not, I mean, to me, one nomination for essentially 35 people, 35 board members, that talks about this diffusion of power in some sense. It's not you, it wasn't Scott Epstein, it wasn't
Yeah.
one individual. Maybe in the future, I'm not eliminating that possibility, but the point is, it's this shared power about saying it's the community who really did this.
Yeah, a lot of people had their hands in this work on the board and outside the board. So yeah, it is exciting to see that recognized.
So, relatedly, but on another issue important to your council, your neighborhood council, I know, is housing and homelessness. You can't really disentangle the two, and we all know how related housing and transportation, all these issues are. Why is that such an important issue?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you're absolutely right that these two issues are intimately linked. We have an affordability crisis in Los Angeles and in coastal California. We simply haven't built enough housing and the types of housing that people need for the last 40 years. We're in a big hole. Mm-hmm. And as a result, the price of housing has been bid up to a level that is unsustainable. The wealthiest of us are doing okay. Those of us in the middle are, maybe renting instead of being able to afford a home. And as you go down that ladder, the least fortunate of us are being pushed out onto the street.
Yeah.
And so we simply have, in terms of homelessness, an enormous humanitarian crisis in this city. It's the hotspot in all of the U.S. In terms of homelessness, and people's lives are at risk. People die all the time due to living on the street. So we have to do something about it. And I think a lot of my fellow board members are very passionate about these issues as well.
And what, in terms of neighborhood councils, what do you think they can do about this, and what are they doing about this? And do you think we're doing enough in this system, the neighborhood council system?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can do a lot of things. So at Mid-City West, one of the things that we did, which has been transformative for our community, was opt into the homeless count. Mm-hmm. It's a simple thing, but it's something that I think really opens people's eyes. And 3 years ago, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority reached out to neighborhood councils and said, "Will you help us with this? Mm-hmm. We need to recruit 8,000 volunteers to get to every corner of this county." And we said yes. And more councils said yes over the years. So that's one simple thing. I think we also have to learn how to say yes to housing in our communities. And I think we're seeing more of that in the neighborhood council system as well. Traditionally, I think there's been a lot of councils have tended to be concerned about adding more density, more housing to their communities. That's changing now, I think. Mm-hmm. And I think often the conversation around these development projects hasn't been all that productive in the past. So I think the typical sort of scenario in terms of negotiations with developers that has happened with neighborhood councils or homeowners associations or other residents groups in the past has been, oh no, this is too big, too much traffic, too much impact, make it a little smaller. Yeah. And it's this little dance where the developer will then make it a little smaller, but no better.
Right.
And so what we've tried to do as a council is change that process a little bit to be more constructive. Can we make these projects better for our community? And the two things that we focused on are inclusiveness of the projects. Mm-hmm. So can we have a certain proportion of the units designated as affordable so that we can create mixed income communities? Mm-hmm. And I'm very pleased to see that, what we're seeing for the most part with mixed use developments is a lot, at least in Mid-City West, is we're seeing developers use the state density bonus program, which I think is one of our more effective tools in building mixed income communities. So that's one thing that we've really communicated strongly to builders on. And the other is how can we leverage these projects to improve the public realm?
Right.
Can we have street trees that actually provide shade in front
shade.
instead of palm trees? Can we add crosswalks because there's going to be all these new people that are going to need to cross the street? Can we include that in the project? And we've been successful on both of those counts.
That's great. So when you think about the mission of the neighborhood council system, when you were talking about getting more people involved with city government, making the city government more responsive to those people, do you think the neighborhood councils are living up to that mission?
I think we're improving over time. I think we have some work to do. I think that the councils are starting to be more innovative in how they engage the community. So you see more councils using social media tools, connecting with younger audiences, connecting with more diverse audiences. I think we need to meet people where they are, and offer different kinds of ways of getting involved. So at Mid-City West, coming to a public meeting and being in a game of I like this or I don't like this is not for everybody.
Right.
But some of those people may want to go and count the homeless, or they may want to walk door to door and ask people if they would be willing to water a free street tree from the city. So I think we need to increase sort of the menu of ways for people to engage, and that's something that we've focused on, and I'm seeing that in other councils as well. And I think we need to be very thoughtful about getting different types of people involved in the system as well.
Are there any important lessons you've learned from your experience in the neighborhood council system, whether it's about city government or about community engagement, involvement, grassroots organizing, stuff like that?
Yeah, I think one thing is you can get things done. This is a level of government where you can actually see the impact that you make.
Right.
And you can come up with an idea and work with it to fruition. So I just think, I encourage people to get involved because it'll snowball very quickly, and you'll find that there's actually a lot of power in the system. So that's one thing. The other thing, on the flip side, you learn that change is hard.
Mm-hmm.
There's always going to be folks. We're not monolithic communities. There's always going to be folks that disagree with whatever idea you're trying to advocate for. Mm-hmm. And there will always be political leaders that will disagree with you too. So you have your wins and you have your losses. So I think you got to come at it with sort of a pragmatic approach and a realistic approach. But I think you work hard at it, there's actually a lot of opportunity for impact.
What's the one thing about neighborhood councils that you wish people understood better?
Well, I think that there is a perception among some that, we're just an advisory board. Advisory boards don't have power.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I like to tell people is, yes, it is not decision-making power. It's not hard power, but it's soft power,
right?
But it's real power.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing I want people to understand, and I think sometimes that attitude actually infiltrates down to the board too.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just in the community. It can
power,
oh well, we can't do that. That's out of scope of what we do,
right?
And we're just here to advise on land use decisions.
Mm-hmm.
We've never done anything like that before. What if something goes wrong with that?
Mm-hmm.
Can we really do the homeless count? So shifting that attitude, I think, is important.
Yeah, I definitely see that mentality. We're the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment here. We try to talk about empowerment. We try to empower people. How do you define empowerment?
Well, for me, the neighborhood council system is about shifting from government is they to government is we. So that's the way I see it as empowering, because I think good neighborhood councils really give people the power to change their communities at the ground level, and get involved. I mentioned this project that we just started, a project to plant trees in our community. A lot of people want to see more trees in their community. A lot of people don't know that the city will give out trees for free. The trick is they won't water them, and they will die if they're not watered.
There's something very poetic about that in terms of empowerment, right? Here's your tree, but here's all the catches with that.
So we saw we saw this and we thought, okay, wait, there really isn't a community engagement strategy here to get this done. So the city has this program. They have the resources to give out these trees, but it's never going to happen unless community groups say, oh, we'll take responsibility.
Right.
And it turns out, when that responsibility is shared, it's not that big of a deal, right? You have a garden hose, you water the tree every couple weeks. But it's that community building is what makes it happen.
Right.
So I think that empowers people, because once they understand the system, they realize that they can get the results.
Great. So thank you so much for your time. If you had any final thoughts to share, any social media plugs or anything like that, we'd love to, love to have them.
Well, we're very active on social media. You can find us on Facebook.
I love that you went straight to the Mid-City West. You're just like, no, this is not personal. This is not Scott time. This is all about Mid-City West.
This is about our council.
That's right.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
You all have a great social media presence. We can attest to that. Anne Marie, who we work with here, always gives you lots of praise. So,
that's very, very flattering. We work hard on it, and it has been a tool to get people involved. People see our posts and they come to our events. They volunteer. So you can check us out there. And midcitywest.org is our beautiful website with our beautiful new logo as well. So
you all have done a great job on that. Thank you, Scott, so much for your time. Really appreciate you coming by and sharing all these amazing insights about neighborhood councils and government more generally. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the EmpowerLA podcast. As always, you can learn more about the neighborhood council system at EmpowerLA.org, where you can find information about the efforts of the Mid-City West Community Council and all the other neighborhood councils that make the city of LA a better place. You can also check out our show notes for this episode if you want to learn a bit more about the topics and people we discussed. The EmpowerLA podcast is available in a variety of formats for all your listening needs, and if you are so inclined, please leave us a review so we can get the word out about neighborhood councils. Thank you so much for your support.